Good morning. This is Dishha Bagchi for ThePrint, and we are back with Lieutenant General retired H.S. Panag to discuss his column from this week. China still spreading lies about Galwan. Modi government army must bring closure with formal inquiry. Welcome back, General. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to discuss my weekly column with you.
So in this week's column, you explored China's information warfare on Twitter regarding the 2020 Galwan incident and the need for a formal inquiry into the incident. So to begin with, why has the government not revealed any credible details about the Galwan Valley fight in 2020? And do you think this lack of clarity from the government and the army is further supporting China's information warfare?
By nature, all governments of all nations are very sensitive in issues relating to national security, particularly territorial, very close to the heart of the public. So the government generally try to control the narrative about these issues, and experience has shown that this control is generally counterproductive. And whenever the public is taken into confidence and the media is allowed, it in fact and helps the war effort. And there are examples that glow. In our own country, we have a very successful example of the Kargil war, which was open to media. It was a television war, and the country's morale was high. Everybody knew what was happening. And we had reverses. Of course, we had reverses in the sense that the Pakis had walked into our territory and set up 40, 50 posts, which we had to recapture. But the public was made aware of it, and they were cautious of it, and they knew that the Indian army is acting and the government is acting appropriately. In 71 war, all the correspondents were embedded, and there was no security blanket, maintained. But as I mentioned, that especially in times of reverses, when the government feels that its political legitimacy will go down in the eyes of the public, there is a tendency to present a false picture, and then it is left for the defense analysts and investigative journalism to bring it out. You are well aware that Mr. Anderson, who recently died at the age of 93, he had exposed what happened in Vietnam. And then there was Seymour Hersh, who did the same thing about Vietnam, My Lai massacre. In fact, all the wrongdoings of the United States Army have been actually brought about by their media. The governments never accept it. They keep trying to hide these things. Now, similarly, in Eastern Ladakh, firstly, there was an intelligence failure. We did not know that the Chinese were coming. And on 3rd of May 2020, the armed forces were busy felicitating the COVID warriors. Yes, a noble cause. But at the same time, we lost sight of what was happening on the borders. The Chinese, under the pretext of exercises, had brought in about 2 divisions worth, about 6 combined armed brigades, and intruded into about 6 areas, and without us knowing it. And then we were reacting to the situation. So this was one failure. And firstly, there was intelligence failure. Then there were certain areas which we controlled and which we could not control now, and which were now in the hands of China. And then Galwan itself, things had gone wrong. There was no reason for soldiers to be, engaged in a stone club fist fight when proper military operations were actually taking place. So again, there was the government was probably trying to cover up as to what has really happened, and the armed forces, apart from the cryptic statement that appeared on 16th of January, first information came on 16th morning when they said that three soldiers have been killed and some large number injured. Then they said that by evening, they said on the 16th that 17 soldiers who were injured have also succumbed to their injuries, taking the death toll to 20. So it was something had gone amiss there. Proper military operations were not carried out. So many other factors which we are discussing later. So the army itself was trying to hide it. And then politically also, I think a decision was taken that we are going to control the narrative, and the signal was given by the Prime Minister himself at the all-party conference on the 19th of June, when he said, "ना वहाँ कोई हमारी सीमा में घुस आया है, और ना ही कोई घुसा हुआ है, और ना ही हमारी कोई पोस्ट किसी दूसरे के कब्जे में है."
न वहां कोई हमारी सीमा में घुस आया है, न ही कोई घुसा हुआ है, न ही हमारी कोई पोस्ट किसी दूसरे के कब्जे में है.
This was the general this thing. Then everybody fell in line. All government departments, the External Affairs Ministry, everybody then took the cue from there, including the armed forces, and decided that we will keep a security blanket over this issue. Now, China is engaged in information warfare all the time, and it has been putting out videos, photographs about the Galwan debacle, the Galwan episode in particular, and very graphic details. And there are about, all told, over the years, about 100 odd photographs and videos have appeared on the social media. Now, we have not been able to put out any counter, except for the narrative which has been built up by the media and also by the government, and leaked information from military sources that the Chinese casualties are much larger than ours. But no credible information has been put forward. So if we do not counter China's information warfare with more credible information, or if things have gone wrong, then with a proper inquiry to bring a closure to the case, till then the Chinese information warfare will seem to be credible to the world, if not within India.
Right. So there were some reports before the Galwan incident talking about the fact that the PLA might be planning deliberate military actions to secure the 1959 claim line in the region in 2020. So why did the government and the army not pay heed to these so-called reports and warnings?
See, we have got used to a pattern of activities, intrusions on the border with China. From 1986-87, when Sundarongju incident took place, till about 2008, it was generally very quiet border. I was myself Northern Army commander, 2007, 2008, and there was very little happening in this thing. Their patrols would come up to the areas of their claim. There are about 14 to 22 areas of differing perceptions over the entire border, where Chinese say that the LAC runs here, and we say the LAC runs, on their side. Basically, in 1993, when the agreement was signed, we said that it is, as on today, wherever troops are is the LAC. But the Chinese remained ambiguous, and they said that, and they always have at the back of their mind that their claim line is 1959. That's why the areas of differing perceptions, where we were across the 59 claim line in certain areas, the intrusion started in a bigger way. Then they are well known that 2013 we had the Depsang intrusion, 2014 during President Xi's visit to India, there was the Chumar intrusion, and the Prime Minister had to publicly bring it out to him, very sternly during the press conference. And then 2017 Doklam. In all these cases, what happened was that after the Chinese intruded and we responded, at times we also took some counteraction. There was, after a gap of 15, 20 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, Doklam was a little longer, and status quo ante was restored. So this was the pattern that we had got used to over the years. Now, this time, the Chinese actually launched proper military operations. The signals were very clear. Firstly, the quantum of force. The quantum of force was 2 divisions, 6 combined armed brigades. The intrusions were at 5-6 places where we were, where the Chinese perceived we were across the 59 claim line on their side. That is Depsang. Galwan, it was really not so. Galwan, they were just sensitive because they wanted to come across the bend of the river. Then patrolling point 15, patrolling point 16, 15, 16, 17 and 17 Alpha. North of Pangong, so between finger 4 and finger 8 and Dangchok. So these are the areas where the Chinese came across. So it should have been very clear that the Chinese were trying to militarily, their military aim was to, apart from asserting hegemony at the strategic level, military aim was to re-secure the 59 claim. So this pattern and the way it was conducted, the quantum of force used, it should have been clear that it is no longer a border incident. It's no longer border management. It is proper military operations. We missed this signal. It was misread by the armed forces. It was misread by us politically. And our response, instead of being a proper military action to counter it, we did deploy forces. But beyond that, we thought after some time that they will go back. We did not realize that they have come for keeps, for permanence. And that is why in Galwan also, our response was a border management response. Whereas since China had launched military operations, our soldiers should have been alert to the issue, and armed forces should have been alert to the issue that we have to deal with this matter as a proper military operation and not as a border management problem. So this was a failure on our part, that we missed the signals that came to us, and then the result thereafter was obvious.
Right. So you mentioned all the different military deployments that China had done in that region. So in a way, they were really prepared for a so-called unarmed combat. And you also mentioned in your column that you don't rule out the possibility that this was a deliberate trap by the PLA. So what points towards this theory?
Yes. You see, what happened is that for the first 10 days, there was a whole lot of conflicting reports because there was no official statement given by the armed forces or by the government to exactly what happened. So a number of media outlets and newspapers, magazines, everybody gave out what actually happened. Probably I have mentioned there that the most credible account is what is written by the India Today, which came out on, I think, on the 18th or 19th of June, 2020. And so what appears is that there had been a co-commander level meeting held on 6th of June, and it was decided that some sort of disengagement will take place, about 2 to 2.5 kilometers to 3 kilometers. Each side will withdraw back from all places of where they are confronting each other. That means at all the intrusion points. So this was publicly announced on the 9th of June, and thereafter the disengagement began in bits and pieces. It was an overall agreement. It was just to disengage the forces so that they don't clash with each other. Now, during this disengagement in Galwan, what had happened was that the Chinese had earlier intruded about 1.5 kilometers and pitched the tent near PP-14. PP-14 is actually still short of the LAC. LAC is still about 1 kilometer ahead of that. Now, during the disengagement process, it was agreed that this tent would be removed and they would go on their side. But for whatever reasons, whether it was due to conflict elsewhere or their own design, they repitched the tent it appeared on the 15th morning. Now, when Colonel Babu, who was commanding 16 Bihar, who was responsible for this area, he came to know of this, he decided to sort the matter out. He had been talking to his counterparts earlier. The area was manned by the border guards. And so he went there with 35 men at about 7 in the evening. Now, instead of the border guards, they found that they were regular troops. Now, this is unusual because up to that time, there was border guards. Just like our ITBP, they have border guards. So now it was manned by regular troops. Then their manner of talking, everything was, was changed. It was aggressive. And one of their soldiers pushed Colonel Babu. So our soldiers got enraged, and the Chinese were smaller in number at this point, and our people were, as I said, 35. So we had the better of the situation, and the tent was burnt down. Now, at this juncture, in the enthusiasm, Colonel Babu decided that he should go up to the LAC, which is about 1.5 kilometers ahead of PP14, and investigate the matter as to what else is happening there. Because after all, up to the LAC, it is our area, and Chinese were supposed to withdraw beyond it. So he went across, and also because of the scuffle, had asked for more reinforcements. So the reinforcements fetched up, and then the second time the battle began somewhere around 9 o'clock or just before it. And in the very beginning, Colonel Babu was struck by a stone, and he fell into the river and was killed in action subsequently. This was the toughest fight. It lasted for 45 minutes. 300, people from both sides were in a melee, in a narrow gorge area, with Chinese also occupying higher heights. And there were, small fights going on all over the place, and it was very vicious. So this lasted till about, for 45 minutes, you can say, till about 9:45, 10 o'clock. And then there was more reinforcements were called, and then the third phase took place. And the second and third phase were all in Chinese territory. So now this tells us that the initial Chinese action of putting up the tent was a lure, trying to lure the Indian troops, and then when they came in, then the people who were waiting, inside their area, they were very well prepared and well armed with proper spiked clubs. They had collected stones standing on top to throw the stones down. And with all other kind of medieval weaponry, they were extremely well prepared. And they had much larger number. It was a virtual kind of an ambush into which we walked in. And so it seems that they got the better of us, because on our side, 20 soldiers were killed, and we had 73 odd wounded. 10 were taken prisoners of war, though the photographs put up by the Chinese on the media show a much larger number than this, about 3 to 4 times number than this. And the India Today report says that 16 Chinese dead bodies were also were seen by the troops. So this is what happened, and seeing the circumstances that the Chinese were either smarting under the earlier confrontations which had taken place elsewhere, or the one on that very time, which took place in the beginning at 7 o'clock. When it took place at 7 o'clock, and they realized that the Indians had got the better of us, and then they are walking into our side, then they quickly, prepared a larger force. But as far as basic preparations were concerned, they were all ready with it. Because there's a long history of these scuffles, and here now it was taking place all the way since the beginning of May. Not only here, elsewhere also. So in my view, it appears, I will not rule out that it was a deliberate trap laid by the Chinese, and even planting of the tent was a ploy solicit a response from India, and then trap them, and with a superior force and with superior preparations in terms of fight without arms.
So why has there not been a formal inquiry by the army and the government into the Galwan incident, considering the rarity of the incident and how the armed forces were killed in action? And what is the reluctance behind investigating the matter?
See, first of all, we have already discussed the issue that since the governments are sensitive to national security and particularly territorial integrity, so with respect to happening in eastern Ladakh, the government has taken a decision to share minimum information and with the parliament or with the public. And barring, small statements, nothing much has been formally given out. No discussion has ever been held. Now, the military, which logically should have inquired into such an incident, because it's, as I mentioned, it's one of its kind in the history of the Indian Army. It had had number of lapses, leadership lapses, and other lapses to cover up with respect to Galwan. One way was to let it be out in the public, and rather let it be, if not public, then let it be properly inquired into and take proper get the proper lessons out, and then so that such incidents are not repeated again. And moreover, the reputation of the people who have in fact been killed in action, 20 of them, including Colonel Babu, is at stake, because it appears that they were the only ones who took, he's the only one who took unilateral action.
Right.
And there's a hierarchy up the chain of command, which is supposed to control such events. And so they have been let off, without any accountability. Disengagements are very sensitive issues, and they are monitored at the highest level. In this case, certainly by the brigade commander, div commander, co-commander, and the others would have been kept informed. Whereas from the events, it appears that at 7 o'clock, the first incident took place. Thereafter, Colonel Babu unilaterally goes across to the Chinese side, and then the Chinese have laid a trap, and then there are two more fights spaced out over a period of 5 hours. And we get 20 casualties killed. We have 20 soldiers killed in action. So this doesn't appear logical, because at 7 o'clock, when the first incident happened, information would have gone back to the hierarchy, and they would have had review of the situation, could have reviewed the situation. They could have taken other action, as to diffuse it, or allow the soldiers to take appropriate military action rather than getting involved into a scuffle. It's one thing to get scuffled with the small parties, another thing to have a large body of 300 odd people from both sides battling out with each other in primitive combat. So there was definitely a failure of the hierarchy. And the army is quite happy to cover it up without holding a proper court of inquiry. In fact, there were reports in the Economic Times and other newspapers about an inquiry having been held which was done by GOC of 15 Corps. But rather than tell us what happened, what was the result of the inquiry, the army said no inquiry has been held, also implying that there's no need to hold an inquiry. So this was one part. And the other failures which have taken place of not carriage of weapons, 1996 agreement, it doesn't debar carriage of weapon. In fact, when soldiers' life is threatened, they can use weapons. They can use any amount of force. So this again is a question mark as to why did this sort of a thing happen. And when we all know the story of the Trojan horse, that how the Greeks fooled the people of Troy. So in all such matters, the hierarchy controls the situation, in fact, exercise strict control. It is not an independent operation where freedom of action can be given. So once the army felt that the government wants to have a narrative, sell a narrative to the public, so it joined in. It said it's better that we will safeguard the interests of the organization. So they think. But at the same time, like I mentioned in the end, that when you try to safeguard the interests of the organization, its reputation in this manner, you end up doing more damage. You have safeguarded the reputation of the hierarchy, but you have not safeguarded the reputation of the commanding officer and his 20 and the 19 soldiers who died with him. What about their reputation? That means they were the only ones to be blamed fighting an isolated battle. I mean, carrying the entire country's burden on their shoulders, and the hierarchy was sitting aside and just watching it. So it'll do more damage in the end. And we have got precedents in this regard. We have still not diverged the full details of the Henderson-Brooks report, which happened in 1962. Because the governments at no stage want to be held accountable, or they feel that if they release this report now, in future their own accountability would be asked for.
Right.
So these are the reasons as to why we have not held a formal court of inquiry, and there is a need to hold one. Because if we don't hold one, we'll end up repeating the same mistakes again.
Right. Well, thank you, General. I think you brought up some very interesting points, not just about the Galwan incident and what happened, but also what are some of the reasons behind the army and the government's consequent actions in terms of reluctance behind investigating the matter, as well as the Chinese army and the Chinese continuing to host this information warfare on social media throughout the years. So for viewers interested in reading the full article by General Panag, the link to it will be in the description below. Thank you, and we will see you next week.